Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we've got something special for you. I'm really excited about this one. We're joined by Greg Williams, who's the Master Negotiator, and he's also a body language expert at the Master Negotiator. He's also a 100 Coaches member as well, which I've gotten to know him over the last few months, and I'm so excited to share his wealth of knowledge and experience with all of you. There's so many things that we can relate and use within our organizations and definitely within HR as well. Welcome to the show, Greg. How are you?
Well, I thank you very much, Chris. I'm fantastically well. I tell people I'm A-OK, and that's what I always say.
Love
it's
it.
a state of mind, you know?
It is, right, though. That is true. Like, you have such a fascinating background. I didn't want to do a long intro because you're going to do a better job than me. Tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and your journey to where we are now.
Well, you know, that question in and of itself is a teachable moment from a negotiation perspective. When people ask you, tell me something about yourself, the response you should ask is, well, what would you like to know? And the reason I say that is because you could tell people everything in the world about yourself, and it's like, well, that's not what I was asking you, you know? So you always have to be very specific. But aside from a teachable moment.
I love that, though. What do you want to know? Like, yeah, I'm going to use that, literally, because people always ask me that question and vice versa. What do you want to know? Because it helps them and me.
Yeah, exactly, because it allows you to hone in on exactly what they are seeking from you. So I can give you the short version or I can give you the extremely long version, but no, seriously speaking, from the time I was 4 years old, my parents allowed me to shine shoes. And what I recognized at that point in time was dependent upon how I interacted with people, I either got a larger tip or no tip. Some people would say yes to a shine. Others would say no. If they went into, I shined shoes outside of the corner bar at that time. If they went in with one mindset and I observed that they came out with a different mindset, I knew, okay, well, maybe this is the time to ask again or things of that nature. I say that to say, I did not realize at that time that I was forming the foundation for good negotiation strategies and observing body language. So over a period of time, I learned more about negotiations based on watching my mother. She would negotiate for everything. And I'd say to her, Mom, you know, that's embarrassing. Why do you keep asking for a lower price or asking people if they can do a better deal? And she said, it's your money. The more you keep of it, the more you'll have to do with it as you would like. I was like, okay, let's get past that. I started really formalizing my negotiation experience at Harvard, at a position that I held as a senior VP at an organization, the last organization I worked for before starting my own back in 1993. And I had the highest margins in the company. And the president said, what are you doing differently? I said, I'm teaching my folks how to negotiate better. He asked me to do the same thing for the whole company. Now, I say all of that simply to say, I've written 7 books on the topic, and of course, as you write, you learn, and I practice negotiation techniques daily. My motto is, you're always negotiating because you are. No matter what environment you're in, you are exchanging something about yourself, insights about how you might react in a particular situation, and an astute individual will gather that information and know how to apply it, just like when you ask, tell me something about you, and I say, what would you like to know? It's the same type of premise right there. Like I said, that was a little longer than the short version, but there you go.
No, I love that. So did you study this then? You mentioned your formal education. Did you study it? What is that course? what did you study?
Well, at Harvard, it's called PON.
Okay.
PON, P-O-N, Program on Negotiation. Okay. And not only that, though, again, the practicing on a daily basis of techniques. Chris, I go to swap markets, flea markets, whatever you wish to call them, tag sales, whatever, and I will attempt to negotiate anything just to see what occurs, what response I receive to a request I make, and then see how I respond, what rebuttals come back, so forth and so on. And I have clients, some of whom I negotiate on behalf of their whatever it is they're negotiating for. Others, I actually teach negotiation strategies, and I tell attendees sometimes during the trainings, at lunchtime, at break time, go out and negotiate something for free. And people are like, well, like what? Anything. What I want you to do is to have the experience and bring it back to the class such that we can discuss how it may have been honed better, and we may actually learn something from your experience. So it's the constant give and take. And in an HR environment, boy, oh boy, oh boy, HR professionals really should become more astutely aware of the impact they're having on a daily basis with those that they interact with, because they are seen as the hub of organizations per how the individuals in the company perform. They really are. They really are.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this topic, by the way. So I'm so like, I've got a million questions. I need to just, I don't know where to start. Let's start with this. What are some of the misconceptions people have about negotiation?
The fact that they think they're a bad negotiator, number one. Or, and this is really high on the list, well, I can't negotiate with that entity because I'm just a little small person or I don't have the resources that entity has. It's a misconception, because if that entity is willing to entertain the negotiation process with you, they see some form of value in you. And if they see some form of value in you, it behooves you to exploit, to the degree that they see value, the value that they see. And what I mean by that is, if, well, let me tell it in the form of a story. At one particular point in time, the governor of our state appointed me as chair of the New Jersey Development Authority, which addressed the needs of small, minority, and women-owned enterprises statewide. In that capacity, I had the opportunity to connect buyers with business owners throughout the state. And some business owners would say, well, you know, the state won't do this, that, or the other because the buyers already have their preferred list or things of that nature. I said, okay, if you recognize the fact that the buyer has a preferred list and they're just going through the perfunctory manner of, oh, well, I had to at least talk to 3 small entities, I said, call them on it. Call them on just that. Put them on notice that you're aware of what they're doing. Well, what if that's not what they're doing? Well, if you think they are, call them on it anyway and observe their response. There's something in the negotiation process called an assumptive question. The assumption being whatever you ask is true. You know what I mean? And that's true, right, Chris?
Yeah.
That's an assumptive question.
Yeah, exactly.
Right
yeah,
there.
right, Chris. Yeah.
And you know what? Now, I observed the body language signals that you emitted as you did that too. There was a nice smile and you were nodding your head.
Yeah.
You know, you and I were in sync then. That's something else from a negotiation perspective that you should observe. Observe someone's body language per the extra meaning their signals add to whatever they're conveying. Because suppose you said, no, yeah. Okay. The head shaking would have been indicating, no, I'm not in agreement with you.
Saying no, the word saying yes.
Right, exactly. And anytime you see a discrepancy between someone's body language and their verbiage, observe the body language. The body attempts never to lie. It always wants to be in a state of comfort. And thus, when we're telling something that's not completely truthful, we will emit gestures such as rubbing our hands.
Or this.
Yeah, exactly. and the thing is, you just have to be observant, because whatever caused that action was what is motivating the action. And if you understand what caused it, you can then address just that.
Yeah, I actually have a story. You might be right, because when we first started, it was just me and Shane, and we ended up getting a client who was a multi-billion-dollar client. Everyone listening would know of a client. I'm not going to say who they are because they're still a client, thankfully, okay. 5 years later. And they said to us, we're a small business, so obviously cash flow is very important to us. And they said, no, it's 90-day payment terms. But if we waited 90 days, we wouldn't have a business because we had to pay our salaries, right? And they're like, no, we don't do that. And I remember myself and Shane negotiating back and forth, and I was like, Shane, they need us. They came to us. they want to work with us. Like they, you know, there's yeah, but they're not going to change for us because that's just our process, right? I was like, no, they can make it happen, you know. And we kind of went back. Long story short, we went back and forth, and they paid within the 30 days. But it was a small example of where, like, most people, including my own founder, was like, they'll never do that. And I was like, no, they will, because they need us and they want to work with us.
You know, Chris, that's an excellent story to highlight the point that we were discussing, because you're absolutely right. If you take the perspective of, well, they would never do that, you won't try to see if they would do that. And by not trying, you've lost an opportunity that you never even realized was available. All you have to do is reach out and grasp it.
Yeah. And that's why I loved, for me, negotiation and sales in particular changed my whole life. Growing up poor and having no money, and then getting a sales job at 17, and then understanding, the more I learn about everything that we're describing, I became obsessed with body language. I became obsessed with every sales book that existed. You know, closed, you know, open and closed questions, and the question techniques, and just everything, objection handling. And I felt like I had this special power that no one knew about, to be able to get someone on the phone and control the conversation, get my yeses. And like, it just, I couldn't believe it. And at the time it was, you know, I had a little sign on my computer that said, the more that you learn, the more that you earn. You know, it's pretty cheesy. But it was true. And I would observe people on the train, on the way home, and I'll just constantly just be studying the body language. I've got my headphones on, so I can't even hear anything, but I'm just observing the way people interact and the body language between people. I would started to when I started doing more face-to-face, observe those things you were saying, someone saying yes, but they're doing this. Or when I could really get to the point where I was convinced I could tell when people were lying by, you know, the little brush on the nose, or the way their eyes would look to, you know, a certain direction, or certain things like that, or the fact that I was having a conversation, even interviewing, when you've got a candidate with their arms crossed, legs crossed, facing away from you, right? Or like, you know, just, it is absolutely fascinating, this whole area. Yeah.
And you know what? And you're absolutely right. And let's highlight that, because one way to observe what someone's thought process is by, as you alluded, the signals they emit. Now, the one thing we have to be aware of is how that individual utilizes such signals that are generic to him or her. Meaning, you create a foundation first by just observing that individual, and do it in a natural environment, one that's natural for that individual, and see how they respond. If they walk into a room that's filled with individuals that they sense are their peers, do they perform one particular gesture or a set of gestures as opposed to walking into a room with their superiors? Okay, now they're in a room with you, and you have that foundation. That's just a brief interjection about how to actually verify someone's body language, because, Chris, sometimes that means somebody's nose is itching. But if they do it several times throughout the interview, you know something's up for sure.
That's what I mean. It's not just saying you're right to everyone, but if you spend enough time with people, like my wife and I, we both know when each other's lying, or when there's something wrong. She can say there's nothing wrong, and I can say there's nothing wrong, but we both know. Like we've been together for 15 years.
Okay.
we know, right? And it's those small cues, where it's verbally or physically you see, and you're like, okay, I need to check in. There's something wrong, or, you know, let's have a conversation.
Exactly. And that's something HR professionals should be very astutely aware of also. Depending upon the size of the organization, if they have a certain, let's say, department that they are either in charge with guiding from an HR perspective or something of that nature, they should really observe the people in that department or group to see how their mannerisms change on a daily basis and what causes those changes to occur. In so doing, that HR professional is getting ahead of a curve that could possibly blow up to be something really big or something of that nature. But like you stated, paying attention to the little nuances of someone's body language will truly give you insight, and they don't have to say a word. No. Their body will speak for them.
Yeah. What are some warning signs for people to look for, perhaps then with employees?
It depends. And I give that response a lot when I'm asked about negotiations and body language, because it depends on what has created that situation. So let's create a hypothetical situation whereby there's a rumor that folks are about to be laid off in the company. Well, let's say some people start showing up late for work. Let's say all of a sudden some people start working more diligently than they ever have before. Well, you know that the signs that's generating that particular action from those individuals is the fact that there's a rumor about people possibly being laid off. And now people may want to put their best foot forward, those that are working late, or say the heck with it, I'm out of here any daggone way. So the sign in that case for those that are coming in late might be, oh, wait a minute, this person, as valuable as they are to our organization, has heard the rumor and they're out looking for another position. Intervention is required here because we want to keep that person. That's just one example.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's become even more challenging now because we're all on Zoom?
It has, well, it depends.
Yeah, I'm going to hear that a lot from you.
Yeah.
No, but I get it, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the organization, number one, and the geographical location, because yes, we're all on Zoom now, but as you may be aware, at least in the United States, companies are calling their employees back into the office. And some employees are like, whoa, wait a minute. I love this Zoom thing because I have more freedom, so forth and so on. Now you're taking that freedom from me. And some are revolting. You mentioned that both of us are members of 100 Coaches, and there's a survey, if you wish to call it that, that's going on right now about how employees feel about being called back into the office. So it really does depend on the stimuli that causes reactions.
Yeah, no, I get it. What are some of your sort of favorite negotiation techniques that you can share? Because, you know, HR leaders are constantly negotiating, whether it's for more budget, whether it's with employees, whether it's different leaders, because, you know, they're touching every single function and department, both in the organization and externally in society. So, you know, they need all the help they can get. Did you lose me there? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, but that was one right there, the pause.
That worked so well. That was so good. You've definitely done that before, haven't you? So, okay, explain more about that. I was like, is my Zoom frozen or anything? That was so good. You got me there. Go on, explain.
And the pause is something you can use in a negotiation because, first of all, people wonder exactly as you did in real time. Hey, what the heck is going on? What just happened? You know? And people will give instant reaction as to what they are thinking. So the pause itself is one good technique to use when you're making an offer, listening to an offer, making a rebuttal to an offer. Because if someone says, I have to have a $5,000 raise or else I'm going to leave, and the HR professional just pauses. And the person may say, well, maybe I could do with $3,000.
I see. So it's almost like you're regaining control of the conversation, even though you're not saying anything.
Exactly. And in that particular example, that person has started negotiating against him or herself. That's right.
So good.
That's right.
And I did the same thing, right? I had to react. I had to say something. You didn't do anything.
Right. The other is what we spoke of a moment ago about assumptive questions. An assumptive question can be implied also. So let's say the individual said, well, hey, I can do with $3,000 though. And if you choose not to pause, the HR professional's response might be, $3,000? You know, in the form of a question. Again, you're just tossing back what that individual said, and the assumption there is, tell me more.
Without having to say it.
Questions. Yeah. So that individual may say, well, how about an extra week's vacation? Again, you got that individual going, negotiating against him or herself. And here's the other good side of that. The other good side of that is when it's all said and done, you always want to make that individual feel as though she or he has value by granting them something. So, in this particular situation, they've come from $5,000 to asking just for an extra week's vacation. If you feel magnanimous, you may say, well, Chris, you are a valuable employee. I think we can actually grant you that request because you are valuable. How do you feel about that? Now, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I love that one. By the way, the how you feel.
Uh-huh.
I love that question. Like, I used to evoke like the emotional questions, like how did that make you feel if X, Y, and Z? And like, Chris, it would make you feel. I used to love doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's a check-in to get feedback.
Yes.
And you should watch the body language too, because someone says that's good versus that's good. Same words. The body language indicated two different sets of sentiments, And for the one that says that's good, that person really does not feel as good about that situation as they are trying to profess through their words. So once again, HR professionals should be aware of gestures that accompany words that indicate the emotional feelings that someone has about a particular situation.
Yeah. Whenever you speak to most people about negotiation, the first thing they say is, every negotiation has to be a win-win. Right. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Because that's actually the like cliche traditional thing you hear, right? Like a success negotiation is a win-win. I get what I want, you get what you want. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's my favorite word again. It depends.
Let's give you the word of the show.
Exactly.
It depends.
And Chris, seriously speaking though, the reason it depends is because in some situations, people may just want to say, oh, I negotiated with him or her. They thought so much of me that they let me within their realm just to negotiate. That is the win for them, regardless of the outcome.
Interesting.
The point is, you have to understand what a winning situation is per how that individual perceives the negotiation and the outcome. That's what really determines a win-win situation. Let's say, hypothetically, you were involved with someone in a negotiation and they were looking for a 50-50 split, so they say. And they came away with a 90-10, you with the 90 and them with the 10. And yet you promised them all kinds of additional business if they would go to 10% at this particular point in time. They may come away thinking, wow, that was a tough negotiation, but my goodness, think about all the future business I'm going to get. And they're satisfied with that 10%. So for them, that's a win. Now, let's contrast that, though, to the individual that takes a win-lose perspective. The only way I can win is if I cause you to lose. That's a different monster that you may be negotiating with, as opposed to someone that has the conception of win-win. And when you're negotiating in that type of an environment, an employee comes in and says, I want the $5,000 raise, or else I'm quitting on the spot. Okay, now you have a much tougher scenario from which to deal with. And depending upon that demeanor was a little more harsh with the finger pointing and everything else, as you saw, or stabbing at the air. You might then say, well, tell me more. It's like, tell you more? What do you mean tell you more? I just said 5,000.
I love that. It diffuses the situation. And yeah.
You're absolutely right. See, you're displaying your astuteness for dang sure, which we all know you have.
Yeah, it's just like such a fascinating thing. Do you think that most leaders that you meet with and work with, we work with so many amazing organizations, are prepared? Or like, because I feel like most, it sounds bad, but most senior executives I meet and interact with, I've never had any formal training in negotiation.
You know, that's sad to say, but it is reality in some situations. I'm brought in at times and I'm amazed at how senior management has really not gone through or had any type of formal negotiation experience or training. And they want me to train their staff. And I'm like, wait a minute. So what message have you been sending to the staff about negotiation to date? But It's a skill that some have honed without realizing that they have that skill. Seriously speaking, you do not get to the upper echelons of management in large corporations without having some form of educational, or let's just say negotiation skills, period, and point blank. You may have honed your skills not recognizing that you were doing it because you had a privileged position because of who it was that you knew that pulled you into the corporation, and that
But those
person.
are the few, right? Probably.
Yeah, exactly. Those godfathers were the ones pulling you along. But still, those that have been in larger corporations and have gone up the ranks, they were utilizing negotiation skills, whether they realized it or not.
Yeah. No, definitely, because I think a lot of it doesn't come natural. Because your initial reactions, like, for example, that pause is not a normal human reaction to in that situation. Your first response is, like, which is what I did, is to fill the gap.
Exactly.
So, you know, when I got into sales, it was really hard to ask an open question and just be silent. Even though the person hasn't said anything, you want to fill the gap. You want to just, you're so tempted to do it. And I'd see it with my new hires when I was training them. They really wanted to fill every single moment, every breath of air. They want to say something, but it's the power of silence and just letting that person think, ruminate, and then you really understand what the objection is or what they're thinking, or, you know, what the underlying issue is. But that is not normal.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And if you are in the power position in a particular situation and you utilize the pause, you really do get a greater perspective of that individual's thought process, because you mentioned eyes a moment ago or earlier in this interview. Now, some people will tend to look up and to the left when they're trying to recall something.
Yeah.
Others will look up and to the right when they're trying to do so. But here's the thing. You need to, again, form that foundation of how they utilize their eye movement to determine, okay, that person's looking to a point where they're trying to recall something. And if you use the pause and observe even how that person's eye movements occur, once again, are they looking to recall something from the past, or are they looking towards the future? Most people tend to look up and to the right.
Which is when they're making something up. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A lie, maybe, for example. Yeah.
Or the truth that's a lie as they believe the truth to be.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's another layer, right? Because they could generally believe that, yeah. It's interesting because most people would never, this is years ago, I did a course, an online course for micro expressions. And I can't remember the guy. He was the guy that kind of came up with that whole field. I can't remember his name now. I don't know if you can remember the name of someone. There's so many people out there, but he was kind of like seen as at the time the guy when it comes to micro expressions.
Yes.
I forgot his name now.
My gosh. Why does his name just escape me also?
They made the TV series on it. Lie to Me.
Lie to Me. That's right.
Yeah. They made that TV series. So I watched that TV series. I was like, and I found out it was based on someone's work, or like, you know, the broader theme of it. And as well, I was like, why did we not teach this? Like, why do we not teach this? It was a free course. And I was like, I sent it to my friends and they're like, Chris, why did you send me this course? I was like, this is so important. Like, this could change the difference between your career trajectory, your relationship, so many things. Like, even with my wife, like, she knows when I'm trying to use different techniques on her now because I've taught her. I should never have taught her. so she's like, don't do that, Chris. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Because it's built in you, the same way it's built in you to do the pause and to say, you know, it depends. It's now part of it. Whereas, like, I used to do, you know, silly things like, you know, I would want to get, if I want to eat somewhere that I want to eat, I would say, you know, Tasha, you know, where do you want to eat today? You choose. Do you want to go to this place, or this place? And I want to go to all three. But I say, but you choose. So where do you want to go? This place, but you choose. And she would thank me and say, thank you for letting me choose. But I didn't let her choose because I set the foundation of those 3 restaurants, right? But over time, she realized, she was like, no. We're going over here. And I was like, all right, I can't use that anymore. So, you know, just various things, you know, or like, does that make sense? You know, are you with me? Yes. Does that, you know, yes. And then I'm like, so should we do that? Yes. right? And building the compliance from the very early on. But after a while, you don't know you're doing it. You just do it.
You're absolutely right. And you just spoke about something that I also want to highlight. One has to be aware of false premises in a negotiation. You gave her the choice of 3 different choices, and it's like at first she was like, okay, well, oh, and thank you for allowing me to choose the restaurant. In reality, as you said, she then came to understand, wait a minute, there's more than 3 out there. I don't even want to go there. So when someone offers you A, B, or C in a negotiation, they're putting you in a controlled
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same with pricing, right? So I used to say to my clients, would you want to go for this package or this package? But I wanted both. Either way, I win. And they were like, thank you, Chris. I'll choose this package. Sometimes I felt bad because I was like, I know I controlled the negotiation, but that was my job, right? To close deals. And but they would thank me and they really appreciate your, helping me come to that choice, or letting me, they walk away like they chose the price, right? And they chose the thing. So that's sometimes why I asked you about, is there always a win-win? because sometimes I felt like I was almost had a set of, I felt like it wasn't fair that I had that set of skills that they weren't aware of, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. And I never attempt to take advantage of individuals. That's just who I am. And thus, when I'm negotiating with people, well, it happened at a flea market, and here's a case in point. I was purchasing a little small item, and again, I love to just test negotiations, my skills, so I just asked the guy, so what's the best price you can offer? And he said, this is the best price. I'm giving it to you at cost, like that. I said, no, come on. I said, your body language said something different. And he said, okay, I'll drop it by $1 then. Now, Chris, $1, okay, doesn't mean a whole lot at all. And he said, but you know what? I'm going to have to stop coming here because I can't lose money like that. And he was singing me a sad story. Okay, so be it. But the point is, I turned around and I said, well, here's the $1 back. I said, just because you were willing to give it to me. And he said, oh, thank you very much. You would have thought I had given him at least $100 in that particular situation. So again, what's a win for someone is the perspective they have of it. And let's circle back real fast, if you don't mind, to microexpressions. There are 7 microexpressions that are generic to everyone on the face of the planet.
Explain to people what they are, by the way, because we're talking about it as if everyone knows what microexpressions are.
Exactly. A microexpression is an expression that occurs that one displays before the brain has a chance to stop that display of emotion. Fear, anger, surprise, disgust, fear, anger, disgust, rather. Fear,
content.
Anger, disgust, surprise, contempt, sadness, and happiness.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so
and it's a natural reaction. Sometimes in live, either speaking or training events, I'll bring someone up on the stage and I'll say, you're in a safe environment, right? They say, yes, I am. I said, okay, and no one out there is going to harm you, right? And they'll say, yeah, I don't believe anyone's going to harm me. I said, okay, so what I'm going to do in a moment is scare you, and I don't want you to react. Okay, are we on the same page? Yes, we're on the, like that. And as soon as I scream, the person jumps. And I said, well, wait a minute. You knew you were in a safe environment. Nobody was going to harm you. Why did you jump? Because you even knew I was getting ready to attempt to scare you. And they'll go, well, I didn't think about it. That's a micro-expression.
I love the fact that you delivered it mid-sentence.
Yeah.
just throwing them off guard. I can imagine that poor person. You scared me there when you said it. I was like, oh, everyone listening right now. Yeah. Don't listen to this podcast whilst doing anything dangerous, while on a ladder or anything.
Really, right? Exactly. But there's an overarching point there too. From a negotiation perspective, always deliver your most powerful outcome for the negotiation when you have the power of whatever it be it position, be it surprise, be it content that you can offer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that will give you more power in the negotiation.
Yeah. So it is difficult, by the way, back to micro expressions, to notice them. I've probably looked at thousands of pictures when I was obsessed. This is many years ago when I was just really obsessed, and you just look at, 100 pictures of people showing content, and and it looks a little bit different for every person. It doesn't look exactly the same as well. Do you feel like you've got to a position now where you can identify those pretty quickly, like just out of curiosity? Because it's a skill, right? It takes a long time to master that.
It definitely does. And again, think about a quarter of a second.
Yeah. By the way, for everyone listening, it's like literally instant. Yeah.
So I mean, you can see the twitch of the corner,
or the bite of a lip, maybe.
I'm sorry.
Like when someone bites their lip quickly. Like when they don't want to say something right, they bite their lip. The
contempt gesture.
The contempt, of the cheek.
They'll do something. They'll go, sure, I can agree with that. And just that fast, you can pick up and it's like, that's not what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's where it's fascinating, right? Because people don't know. Like, and I'm like, it's such a. I feel like it's a superpower. Like, I do feel like it's a superpower, because especially, that's why I used to love the train journey home, because I couldn't hear anything. I had my headphones on, and all I'd do is sit on the train and just watch how people interact with each other and see the expressions. And I just be like, this is amazing. And you see, like, and the body language is such obvious ones, like the way people sit next to each other, facing away. We all know about the cross legs, cross arms, stuff like that. And people just don't pay attention to that stuff.
Exactly.
Most people don't. And I'm always looking at it. My wife, especially, I'm like, I've done something wrong. I'm in trouble. I'm like, I'll get home sometimes and I'm like, spend like 10 seconds looking at my wife. I'm like, all right, I'm in trouble. I forgot to do something. And then I'll immediately address the situation. And she's like, how did you know? I'm like, you got to pay attention. And similar with your employees, because there could be people that are suffering in silence that you don't know about, that it's important to know this stuff.
And that's really bringing it back home, as it were. You're absolutely right. When we were talking earlier about that HR professional observing the demeanor, the mannerisms that are displayed of employees can give such great insight. And the point that you also mentioned a moment ago about most people do not observe such gestures, my goodness, if an HR professional wants to increase his or her abilities and skills, paying attention to someone's body language and the verbiage, the nonverbal communications that people use when they're speaking or in an environment is something that will heighten that HR professional skill set. Definitely.
Yeah. What's the statistic that is normally thrown around about the communication, physical versus verbal? Is that a myth?
Well, you hear all kinds of numbers.
Yeah.
Because at one particular point in time, I heard something, 85% is nonverbal, 15% is verbal. And the number, truth be known, Chris, I do not know what the actual number is, because it's such a variant that you hear people speak of about that number. I've looked at different studies come out with different numbers. Would you agree though that the vast majority is nonverbal, right? Yes, and that's exactly what I was getting ready to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say.
Yeah, it's interesting that the vast majority is that, but we only spend our time on verbal communication.
And even to the degree of the pace at which someone speaks, we should take notice. Because if someone is speaking at a normal pace, whatever normal happens to be for them, and all of a sudden they slow the pace down, something caused them.
You lean in again, right? As a listener, you lean in. It's like when you hear I was trying to talk to my wife about that, for example, how a president is taught. They have a cadence. You hear a president speak, or someone who's been trained. You can hear it from a mile away, because they'll have the American people. And it's like there's like a tone, and it makes you lean in and listen. Whereas if someone's speaking monotone and it's just like da 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 da, da, you kind of just zone out and you're just like, oh, you're not in there. And I used to do that with sales, right? So when I'm trying to close or talk about a feature, I would elevate my voice, my tone, right? And then similarly, if I'm trying to talk about something less negative, I'll lower my tone, and as well. And I kind of got to a point where I mastered that. and to re-engage someone into the conversation by going up and down in my tone. I'm probably not saying the technical way of saying it, but that's something I read and something I used a lot. What's that called? How do you refer to that?
Well, you hit the nail on the head actually with the tonality and intonation also.
Intonation.
Because the example I use is woman without man would be useless versus woman without man would be useless. Woman without man would be useless. 3 different tonalities, ever so slight, but one can detect a slight difference in meaning. One states woman without man would be useless, and man would be useless without women or woman. So again, where one highlights a word is the tonality at which they will place the emphasis on that particular word. And that allows people to perceive something is more important than the rest of that statement. And that's how you use it to point out what is important, the tonality that you use to highlight a particular word. You want $15,000?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, yeah. And even like you would say, I understand how you feel, and it's when you say feel, you evoke an emotion and you want to say it in a tone, right? I understand how you feel. Like it's just, I got obsessed to the point where my entire script, I used to bold the words, like where I want to emphasize it, and I would have like different, it meant no sense to anyone else but me. But I had my own kind of language of how I did it, because I wanted to make sure that, especially if someone's reading something, for example, we're talking about sales right now, it's very easy to sound monotone. As well. So that is an art, to being able to read something. I read off a teleprompter in the office when we do our big events. I had to master how to read a teleprompter and make it sound authentic. And and have energy and passion and emotion delivered through reading a script, which is really hard, and I still struggle to do that.
And you know what, Chris? That's something that HR professionals need to master, the conveyance of their emotions. Because someone comes in and says, I'm just having a tough time at home and it's affecting my work. And the HR professional can take 2 different tracks depending upon the situation that's at hand. You're having problems at home, and that's affecting your work? Seriously? Okay, that's so dispassionate, as opposed to something that displays a little more empathy. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you're having challenges at home that's affecting your work. Tell me more. It's the little things that make an HR professional more impactful in an organization. And that's something they should be aware of.
Every professional, right?
Emotions.
Yes. One of the things that have been highlighted especially over the last 2 years, is leading with empathy. And I feel like leaders aren't equipped with those skills that you're describing to be able to have that conversation, or even just the way you phrase the question of "tell me more." Right? We're so quick to try and jump in with an answer, a solution, or a judgment, unfortunately, in some ways, as opposed to just saying, like what you just said, tell me more, and opening up the conversation more.
And in a negotiation, the person that asked the question is the person that's leading the negotiation. Why? Because that person is gathering information as opposed to giving it. And that person, by gathering information, then has a better position from which to respond.
Isn't that interesting, though? Because for so long, when I first started sales, you think that the more that you speak, that you're in control, but it's the opposite.
Exactly.
It's such an interesting dynamic, because it took me, that's what I meant earlier about the silence, the power of silence. I used to love asking a question, and I used to have a, just giving away all my notes. If I hope none of my clients are listening right now, and they're like, Chris has been doing this to me for years. I used to have a post-it note that said who, what, when, where, why, how. Right? And I would ask a question and you would say what you'd say, and I'd be like, oh, how did you do that? When did you do that? What did that mean to you? How did that make you feel? What was the outcome? And tell me more. Oh, and add more. And I just, for an hour, and they're just talking. And I'm just writing notes. You also, whilst they're having a conversation, you can also almost have a conversation with yourself. It's hard to explain. I already know where I'm going 10 minutes from now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like 4 or 5 steps ahead, because you can have time to think during that conversation as well. But when you're talking, you can't think far ahead when you're talking, right? As well. So it's like people think that the more I talk at someone, the more they're going to listen to me and the more in control. It's no, it's the opposite. I had to learn that the hard way.
And Chris, let's call them entry-level salespeople, make that mistake. Oh, well, the more I'm talking, the more control I have.
The more feature and benefits I throw at you.
Yeah. It's like, meanwhile, it's like, oh, I'm not the person that you should even be selling to at all.
I'm not even qualified. Not even a qualified buyer.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no, I think is that something as part of what does your typical sort of training process look like when you walk into organization, just out of curiosity?
Depend upon the level of the individuals per their negotiation skills. As an example, I have one client whose people are negotiating multi-million-dollar deals daily. And with them, we tweak their skills to find out, in listening to what occurred, how it was that they went down one path, or how it is that they could have positioned themselves better, how it is that they could have tweaked a response. We do that. With other individuals that's, let's say, at a very, very low level of negotiation processes, we teach them tactics, strategies. The pause was one for a moment.
I love the pause. I'm going to use that. You've completely threw me off on that one, and it did exactly what you intended it to do. As well.
That's right. That's right. So it really does. There's a variation of skill sets that we address from a negotiation point of view, dependent upon where the individuals are in their negotiation skill set in and of itself.
How do you measure that, where they are in their process?
Sometimes we have mock negotiation sessions, and truly just observe. And that's what I love to do. It's the assessment aspect of the training. And then we create the training based on what we literally saw. Now, some clients will say, well, our people were trained on negotiation tactics and strategies 2 years ago. And my question is, okay, so what is it that you're seeking from a new training and additional training that they need? Well, they just need to negotiate better. Okay, what does that mean?
I could have said what you was about to say there. What does that mean?
Exactly.
What does that even mean?
What does it mean? What outcome have they not achieved, or outcomes have they not achieved that you would like them to achieve by having more training? And what does that look like for you? But when you ask such probing questions, you then get a much more in-depth answer. Now, I've had clients that have responded, well, I don't know. And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, do I really want to take this engagement?
Because you don't even know what you're measuring. You don't even know what the outcome you want. You don't know what good looks like.
Exactly. And that's, boy, that is absolutely right. And I have a reputation. I've been doing this long enough that I'm more guarded about my reputation than just taking dollars from a client. And I'll say, well, how about if we do an overall assessment and then determine what it is that they need to be trained on? And that way, at least we have some form of measurement. Is the closing rate low? And so, what is the closing rate? Some clients don't even keep statistics on stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Have you worked with hiring teams before? I feel like the work that you do, from what I've seen, would be super impactful, especially right now where it's such a, we use the word a war for talent. We've been using that forever since I was a teenager. But now more than ever, it's super competitive marketplace.
Well, yes is the answer to the question. And again, we go through the body language aspect of the negotiation process, teaching them what signs to observe when they're speaking with someone. We talked about tonality. We do that also. We also talk about when it is that one should use the pause, because if you pause too frequently, someone becomes accustomed to it, and then they start to pause also. And someone can use the pause to take the control from you. Because if all of a sudden neither of you are speaking, someone has to say something eventually. The way to overcome that, as I did with one of my clients when I was first called in to find out if I trained the individual, he and I are sitting there. And for 45 minutes, neither of us
No
said
way.
a way. And I thought, okay. Like
Did he
that.
know the technique as well? Is that why?
Yes, he did.
Oh,
yes,
so he knew.
Yes, he knew. He knew. And Chris, here's the thing. Finally, I looked at my watch and I said, well, I guess we could do this all day long. And both of us started laughing.
And then
I later asked him.
You had to break the ice.
We became good friends. And I asked him, I said, during that first exchange when we met and there was that silence, why did you do it? And he said, well, I wanted to see how good you were, what you would actually do. And he said, I knew what you were doing and I knew you knew what I was doing.
That's the only way it works. That's the only way it works. That's probably the only situation where you both knew. Like,
yes.
And I've been there, by the way, where I'm negotiating against other sales directors or just salespeople, and we both know what's happening, and it's quite fun. Like they know what I'm doing. They know, and there's a really, and I respect it. Even when I'm interviewing someone and and they're negotiating with me, for me it carries even more respect. Like the fact that they're not going to settle for less, they're asking for more, and they're negotiating back and forth. I'm like, yeah, I love it. I love it. It's like, for me, it's like such a tip box.
Yes.
I'm like, yes, this is great, and I actually know that they know what they're doing. They know that there's the actual structure around what the process, as well. So listen, I feel like we can have another hour. I can't believe that I said.
Let me just make one more last
quick
statement because you just reminded me of something real fast. HR professionals should also realize no only means no for the moment, because you're always negotiating.
It's not now.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the end.
That's how I look at sales, right? And for all those years, I used to see no as not now.
Yeah,
and I trained myself that way, right? Because otherwise, you have this emotional attachment, and that's another thing about negotiation. That's another thing. How do you remove emotions from the negotiation process, or do you think you should keep it as part of the negotiation? It's hard not to.
Well, it depends, but let's go back. Because you plan for the negotiation to come. And in your planning phase, you assess what might occur that might evoke certain emotions.
Oh, so you're looking in advance. All right. Okay.
Yes. And you've
kind of processed it already. You know that may be an issue that may happen.
Yes. And if you know it may happen, you can even role play that situation before it occurs so that you can really sense the emotions that you might experience during that time and control it. The point is, people tend to lose control of their emotions when something happens that was unexpected. If you expect it, hey, you can control your emotions. I had a guy jump up and scream in my face at one particular point in time. I had anticipated him doing that because he had a bully type of negotiation tactics that he liked to use.
I've had someone like that, and I knew that too. I had someone like, you can't do this to me. I had someone who went great, but I kind of, he was known to be explosive, erratic. So I was like, I was like, this may happen today, Chris. So just prepare yourself. And I, it was hard not to get emotional, but I somehow did. But I get what you're saying. You can.
And Chris, when he did that, I looked at him, didn't say a word for a few moments, and then I said, thank you. And now that you've gotten that out of your system, would you like to continue, or would you prefer to take a break so that you can get yourself under control? Just in such a calm demeanor and everything else, like, what you just said didn't faze me at all. Next, type of thing. And he looked at me. And he said, okay, well, I need to take a break. He came back and apologized, Chris.
Because you just because you didn't react, is sometimes the best thing you can do. It's like when you have someone who wants to re-argue with you and you don't entertain it. It kind of sometimes flips the other way around where they're like, you're right, like, I'm sorry. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, don't want to entertain it. Last thing, what advice would you give to people that, are of going into negotiation and you don't get what you want, to overcome that feeling of loss, or I don't know what the way you deal with it, because we've all been on the opposite ends and felt like we lost what we wanted, or we got screwed over, or or however you want to feel about it. What advice do you give to people around that, how to deal with that?
Well, in the planning phase of the negotiation, you seriously had to think about.
Oh, really? You also do that? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, in the planning phase. Okay, so if
plan
this
for the
does
loss.
not
Okay.
I'm sorry?
And process the loss, like as if you were going to lose it. Wow, I didn't think about that far.
Not only that, to insulate your emotional state of mind if that occurs, have a recourse already figured out per what you are going to do next. Because as we said, no means not now. That's all. So if you come out of the negotiation and it was not as rewarding as you thought it would be, what's your next step? I've been asked to submit RFPs, requests for proposals for trainings, and they ended up going with someone else. Well, I circled back and later found out, well, can you tell me how that particular training went that individual delivered? Well, she didn't really deliver this, that, and the other. Okay, well, how about I do so for you? And I've gotten additional opportunities just like that. Again, no only means no for the moment. Don't walk away with your feelings hurt. Walk away emboldened as the result of having had the experience.
I had this advice of one of my family members recently who went for a job interview and didn't get the job. And I was like, oh, great. So when's the next one?
Yeah.
And no, but their response was, I'm not going to another one because I didn't get the job. I was like, but just because you got a no doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for more of the same job, right? What did you learn from it? Obviously, did you ask for feedback? No, there was no and I realized most people do that. Like they get the rejection, which is why I asked, and they don't have that thought process. I love the fact that you're already planning having a course of action after. Despite, I think it's a very good, very great piece of advice for everyone listening.
And you gave your family member great advice. Ask for feedback. So the next time he or she does go on an interview, I'm sure, well, hopefully they'll remember to ask for feedback, because there's a learning process. We benefit from everything we engage, be it not as great as we thought it would come out to be, or as good as we thought it would be. We learned something. But in order to learn what it is that we learned, we had to observe the fact that we did gain. We didn't lose, we gained.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it, right? And again, that's a state of mind. Every time I would get a no, whether it's sales or anything else, you just learn more. It's not a negative thing. It's great. You just learn how not to do something. And I'm like, and then you start kind of, I used to do kind of like a post debriefing with myself after my sales calls. And this wasn't something I was trained. Maybe I just wanted to get better, I suppose. And I was like, what didn't I do well? What could I have done better? And then I'd start testing things. Let me try it this time. And almost like A/B testing what I was doing. And I never saw it as a failure. I just saw it as like, not now. Or my sales director used to say, you're one step closer to a yes. All the time as well. But you can apply that to everything. Go on, sorry.
I have all of my clients do a post-mortem after a negotiation.
Oh, really? Okay,
just
great.
Like you said a moment ago. They always do a post-mortem for daggone shit.
That's why you learn the most.
Yes, exactly.
It's not even during the conversation. Is after, right? Is where you learn the most. And in the failure is where you learn the most. Because if you just win, you don't learn anything. I get the most satisfaction off of coming off a call where I've had to negotiate hard for the deal. I come off of the call feeling like a million. I'm like, I feel so, as opposed to when I just get what I want and I'm like, great. Or, whereas I come away feeling they got what they want, they're happy. I've got what I want, I'm happy. And I had to work for it.
And that's something in a negotiation you always want to do. Make the other person feel as though they earned what it was that they received, for sure. And Chris, can I just highlight one more point that we ran through real fast? You were getting ready to terminate the interview, and I threw another morsel out there. You did, and attention and kept you more engaged. That's something.
But that's part of it as well, right? It's because most people won't interrupt themselves. If you ask someone a question, they're not going to go, "Oh, Chris, you need to stop talking now," to yourself. So that's something I used to use. Like, that's something I realized as well. If you ask someone a question and you keep them going, they're going to keep talking. Like you did. You went, "Chris, can I ask one more thing?" And you asked it, right? And then we had another 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Conversation. Well, it's honestly, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've learned a lot. I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more pauses. That you got me with that one, and I've never heard about that before until today, and I think it's really interesting for multiple reasons. More just sometimes to give ourselves time to think and process before we actually speak, and sometimes that gets us in trouble when we don't when we don't do that. But I love the power dynamic that it puts back on the individual, which I really didn't expect when you explained to me what's the psychology of what's happening in that situation. Yeah,
exactly.
Who thought that silence can regain control? Right.
There are a lot of tactics in negotiations that I teach that people can truly benefit from.
Yeah.
Now,
well, we need to.
what
where can people reach you? You know, grab copies of the books. Like
depending upon what they want to really. I don't know if I can hold this up correctly.
That's my next reading, by the way.
To win more I'm sorry.
I said that's my next book I'm going to be reading.
Okay. That's one of.
So what was that called? Sorry, I interrupted you while you said it. What was the name of the book?
Body Language Secrets to Win More Negotiations. And this one is Negotiating with a Bully. And both of those books are excellent books if someone wants to truly understand more about the negotiation process. And the bully book is if you want to negotiate or better negotiate against individuals that are stern or bullyish or whatever be the case. People can reach me at themasternegotiator.com. That's THEMASTERNEGOTIATOR.com. And they can reach me via email at Greg, GREG, at themasternegotiator.com.
Amazing.
Chris, thank you so much. I based on the goodness that you are instilling in those that you teach in the HR field, how to become better in all aspects of their discipline, I want to congratulate you for all that you're doing, number one, and just recognize you as the leader that you are.
No, I appreciate that. Without you, there is no show. So thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And for everyone listening, all of those links are already in the description to the books, to the email. We've made your life easy. So click the link below. Make sure you go and connect. And I look forward to doing this again soon, Greg. There's a lot to learn clearly as well. But keep up the amazing work and look forward to doing this again soon.
Thank you, Chris. Be safe.